Hey guys, Waterfowler41 here, and I promised you I'd start getting in some of the more exciting parts on the truck, and this is the first video in the exciting part category, I'd say. So what we're looking at here is the Kooks Catback exhaust. So this is their KST system, part number 352-04100. This is their 304 stainless steel Catback exhaust system. This is the street version. Now they also have a similar version called the race version, and the only difference between the two kits is the fact that the muffler itself is smaller on the race version, which ultimately reduces the amount of dampening on sound, and it gives you a louder system. For record, the video that they posted that Kooks has on their YouTube channel, that is actually the KRT system, so the Kooks racing system, whereas I'll be installing the Kooks street system. But back to the system. So this is T304. Purchased this from realtruck.com for about 950 bucks. I purchased it on a Tuesday, and the kit showed up to my house the following Friday, so shipping was spot on. This kit flew to my house. I've ordered other, I'll say tier 1 exhausts like this from other companies, and it takes a little while because sometimes the exhausts are either drop shipped or they're made to order. For whatever reason, this showed up within 2-3 days, so kudos to whoever involved in that one. But back to the kit. So what do you get in the kit? I guess the most important thing to understand with the Kooks system versus other ones is the Kooks kit will replace everything from your front resonator to your exhaust tips. It's not replacing your exhaust tips, and it's not replacing your front resonator. It's replacing the muffler as well as the 2 rear resonators on the tailpipes. So you have, I'll kind of go in order. So the first piece you get is this little mid-pipe. This will attach to the mid-pipe exhaust on the truck. So you have a factory resonator down here. It's a long straight pipe. It's going to tie right into the factory system. That piece will connect right into the muffler here. So this is the back end of the muffler, and this is a beautiful muffler. The welds and everything, this is spotless. I almost feel bad installing it, but I've heard great things about the Kooks exhaust system, so let's get this thing thrown on the truck. So from the muffler, it then elbows up. It'll tie into a Y pipe. So that's this guy right here. Again, this is beautiful. I'm not sure if it's polished or not, but you know, this is some of the best looking finished exhaust I've ever seen in my life. So we'll go with that. So essentially that slips on to the Y there, and then the Y here ties into these 2 tailpipe sections. So you got one for each side, and then from there you tie into these little rear hanger tailpipe portions, and from there you got the ball section of the ball and joint, so you can hook your factory exhaust tips on there, and then you're good to go. Obviously you get all the hangers, you get the bolts to attach that pipe to your mid pipe, and then you're good to go. So the reason I went with this kit, obviously Kooks is primo exhaust system. They're probably known most for their headers. However, I've seen a lot of good stuff about their catback systems, and I wanted to try something new on this truck. It's a Hemi. I really wanted to wake it up, but at the same time, I didn't want to go with a system that's going to drone. Because this system keeps that front resonator, I suspect it's a little less susceptible to droning on the expressway. And also, just like the GM trucks, this truck has that V4 deactivation, so displacement on demand, DOD. Keep that in mind when you're purchasing exhaust for your truck, because when your engine does eventually conk down into the V4 mode, it can sound like a helicopter's chasing you. So you want to be mindful of the exhaust. If you're going to get a crazy loud exhaust, expect the fact that when you go down in that V4 mode, you're going to get some droning. All right, we are underneath the truck, and what you're looking at here is the OEM mid-pipe. So our Kooks system is going to tie in right here. So we're going to remove this section all the way back, with the exception of the tips. We're going to reuse the tips. So a couple things here. I was mentioning that there's a resonator on that mid-pipe. It's way up there. Some of the other aftermarket exhaust systems replace this piece with a straight pipe. My concern with that is once you take out that resonator, that's one more thing that's going to eliminate the drone. So once you replace it with a straight pipe, all of a sudden you got issues with drone, and I really don't want that, especially because we take a lot of road trips, and you know, after a while you get kind of tired of it. So we're going to remove this ground strap here. Then we got our factory muffler. It's a giant guy, and then you'll see that muffler ties into a Y. So the passenger side of that Y has a clamp, and it can be removed. Unfortunately, the driver side of that Y does not have a clamp. So from the muffler, so from that connection all the way to where that driver side tailpipe connects to the tip, that's all one piece. So plan A is to try to remove some of the sway bar links and free up room and get this truck up in the air so we can remove that all in one piece. Plan B is to take a Sawzall and probably cut that straight piece just up there over those pressure lines and pull the exhaust out that way. So once I get the tailpipes out, then we'll go ahead and install the Kooks system. So as far as removing the system, the easiest way to remove the factory system is to start at the tailpipes. So start back there and then basically move yourself forward. So as we remove the tailpipe, or I'm sorry, we're gonna remove the tips first. And I have the black painted tips, so that's the reason why I kind of want to keep those for now. We're gonna remove those tips, and then we're gonna just start basically tracing the exhaust all the way up front and then removing things one piece at a time. Before you really dive into it, especially on newer trucks, go ahead and throw a ton of WD-40 on all those rubber isolators. You're gonna need to do it. That'll make things a lot easier to get off. So without further ado, I'm gonna go ahead and start removing the exhaust tips, and then we're gonna start working on removing the tailpipe here. So let's get rocking and rolling here. All right, so the first thing we're gonna do is use a 13mm deep socket, and we are gonna remove the exhaust tips here. So like I said, it's just a ball fitting on the exhaust themselves. So we're gonna pop these guys off, set them aside, because we're gonna reuse the exhaust tip portion of it. The fitting here will match perfectly up with the Kooks system. It's just a simple little clamp here, and then they should come off. This also helps ease up everything so you're not banging these around on your bumper. So I'll go ahead and remove those right now. All right, when you're removing the tips, keep in mind that they are clipped onto the clamp itself, and in order to get the clamp off, you gotta take it all the way off. So to release that clamp from the exhaust tip, you just take a flathead in here and just pull this little tang up, and then the exhaust tip itself will slip off of the clamp, and then you'll be able to pull the tip right off the truck. So that's the case on both sides. All right, now that we got the exhaust tips off, the next thing we're gonna do is kind of in a backwards order. But the next clamp that we're gonna undo is gonna be the clamp that holds the right side, so the passenger side tailpipe on, because this is just a slip fit. So all we gotta do is undo this clamp, and then we'll take a dead blow hammer to the back of the resonator there, and that should effectively release this piece of tailpipe from this section. And then we're just left dealing with the long piece from the muffler to the right hand side. So using a 15mm deep socket, we're gonna remove this clamp, and then with a dead blow, we're gonna knock the back of the resonator to hopefully slide everything off nicely here. It's pretty new, only 2,000 miles on it. Should slide off all right. Okay, so we have the passenger side tailpipe slipped off. Now, honestly, this didn't even need a double hammer to get it off. Just wiggling it. The clamp itself is attached to the pipe, so don't expect it to come flying down on you. Just loosen it up enough that it gives you some slack to slip everything off. So once that is slipped off, now we're gonna start focusing on the big portion of the exhaust. So the first thing we want to do is go over to the front of the muffler and unbolt that section from the mid pipe. And also what we're going to want to do is undo that ground strap. So we're going to undo that ground strap, and we'll tuck it into the chassis, probably right over here, just to get it up and out of the way. But first thing we're going to do is, after removing the muffler there, we're going to come by here, remove the bottom bolt from the sway bar end link, tuck that up high so it's out of the way, and then we're going to start undoing the hangers that are holding this section in place. So it's going to pay to have someone help you, because you're gonna have to get up above, let's see, you're gonna need assistance to get up above the muffler and undo that silver bracket holding the hangers in place, because we're gonna pull that out and it'll help dropping the exhaust out of the truck a lot easier. So let's go ahead and undo the two bolts on the front of the muffler, sway bar end link here, and then possibly remove that spare tire to give us some room, and start trying to figure out how to get this thing out of here in one piece. All right, so I went ahead and loosened up the lower sway bar end link. That's basically just it's an 8mm socket here, and then an 18mm socket on the actual nut itself to remove it off of the bottom of the sway bar, and that gives you some room to play with it. Now the other thing I did is I removed the spare tire because it opens up a ton of room here. Now what I'm noticing is there's a heat shield here, and I'm gonna go ahead and remove it. I don't know if that's gonna buy us enough room that we need, but it at least gets it out of the way and makes the area underneath here a little bit easier to work with. So I have the two bolts in front of the muffler removed. I have the sway bar end link removed, so I got some room to move that out of the way. Now I'm gonna remove this heat shield here, and then we're gonna start going after these isolators. So spray them down with WD-40. We're gonna unbolt the one over the top of the muffler. We're not gonna try to slip it off there. We're gonna unbolt it. It's way back there. And then we're gonna start monkeying around with this thing to try to get this piece out in one piece. I think we could do it. We might need to jack up this side of the truck a little bit from the frame just to separate the room here. But let's give it a shot. Okay, so we undid the sway link. I removed that heat shield, and then we jacked up the side of the truck from the frame. And inevitably, or essentially what that does is it will lift up the body and then leaves the axle on the ground, kind of freeing up space in here, which is what you want to do. Now the next thing I'm going to do is go up to the front by the muffler over there, and you see two orange isolators. They're attached to that silver bracket. We're going to unbolt that silver bracket. There's two bolts that go directly into the frame up above it, and then that's going to drop down. So those hangers will come with that muffler. The muffler's got one more hanger right in front of it that we're going to leave on there. So while my dad undoes the back one on that muffler, I'm going to undo this one, and then we're going to try to basically snake this thing through, and it's going to leave throughout out the front underneath the truck. All right, so what you're looking at is the OEM exhaust in one piece, which means we got it out without cutting it. Now I'll show you what we did. So the truck is jacked up right off the frame on the driver's side. We undid the rear sway bar link. I removed the heat shield for the spare tire, and with that room that bought you, it was easy to take the exhaust and slide it that way, turn it, and just kind of wiggle it out. Now I will say this is going to be next to impossible doing this on your own. It is a hard thing to do because there's a lot of tubing here that the exhaust will get caught on, and the heat shield up there on the fuel tank that it got caught on as well. So jack the car up from the frame, undo the rear sway bar link first, jack the car up on the frame. That buys you enough room. Remove the 3 bolts holding that heat shield on, then you're good to go, and it slides right out. So putting the Kooks exhaust on is easy peasy. Now basically we're going to start from in reverse. So we're going to start at the muffler itself. We're going to attach the muffler to the factory mid pipe way up there if you can see it. Then we are going to attach the Y pipe. We're going to route the tailpipes. I'll reinstall the heat shield here, and then it should be smooth sailing right out to the tips here. Okay, before you go to start installing the muffler, the first thing you got to do is remove this factory gasket off of the OEM exhaust, and it basically just unclips like that. And then we will throw it right on here, and it'll work just like that with our factory mid pipe. Okay, so the muffler section is prepped to go on. So what I did here is I just loosely put on that front little mid pipe piece, that straight piece, because it has a hanger on it. I also installed the OEM gasket. It was in good shape, so we're going to reuse that one. Put the band clamp on there loosely, and then that way it allows everything to slip around. Then I put the rubber insulators on the back of the muffler. So there's 2 studs in the chassis itself. This will just pop right up on there, and it'll hold everything, and it'll just put the nuts back on there. And then the other thing I did is I went ahead and put anti-seize on the joints here. So in the future, if this system ever needs to come off for whatever reason, it'll come off easier. All right, so the other thing that comes in the kit is the hardware. You will need these to attach the muffler to the OEM mid pipe. So some grade 8 bolts, some washers, nylon lock nuts to get everything cinched down. So we're going to go ahead and get these things prepped. So once we get that hung up, we can get everything kind of finger tight and then start working on the rest of the exhaust here. All right, so once the muffler's on, we went ahead and slipped the Y pipe on there. Again, just keep everything loose. The truck is still jacked up, so until the truck is lowered down and everything's situated where it's going to be, we're not going to tighten everything down. That way we could slip everything around and move it for the clearances. So we're going to get those clamps at least finger tight so they're held in place, and then go ahead and start slipping on the tailpipes. So the muffler is fully in place, so basically all downhill from that guy. So let's go ahead and get the tailpipes installed here. Okay, so we have the Y pipe installed. Then again, everything's finger tight right now, and the anti-seize is on each of the male joints. Then we have the left side pipes. So I believe it had blue tape on them. Those go down the driver's side. So we put on the tailpipe portion of it, and that feeds into the pre-exhaust tip area. So before you hang it on the hanger itself, make sure you attach this and then install it onto the Y pipe as one. Now that Y pipe does need to be turned at a very specific angle. Took us a little while to figure that angle out. But basically, once you have this stuff all installed, it can only go in one way, and use that to help you locate the rotation of the Y pipe back in there. So then once you got the driver's side one on, you can go ahead and do the passenger side much the same. So now what we're going to do is lower the truck, reinstall the heat shield, and then I'll go back through and tighten up all the clamps here, because right now everything's finger tight and it's just dangling around. So I will lower everything so it's all situated where it needs to be. Then we could twist things around. Certain pieces of the exhaust can only go in one way, which is nice, because then you just kind of leave it and let everything else adjust around it. But after that, once we get everything tightened up, then I will go ahead and install the factory tips, and then we're good and we can fire this bad boy up. Don't forget when you lower the truck to reinstall your sway bar end link here, just to make sure everything's kosher in the back. All right, now that the truck is lowered down and everything's where it's at riding height, and the rear sway bar link is attached, I'm gonna go ahead and start adjusting everything. The first thing you could do that doesn't require any adjustment is tighten this guy down. Once you tighten that down, you can kind of work your way all the way back, because the ultimate fine adjustments are going to be made at the exhaust tips or those pre-exhaust tip portions, because you got some wiggle room with where they end up. You just basically want them aimed straight out the exhaust tip hole. But you could start from here and then just basically tighten everything as you get back, and then by the time you get to the tail end of it, you could throw on the tips, because everything should be lined up. So let's go ahead and knock that out. This is 17 millimeters on both sides. I have the bolts facing towards the back, that way you don't get a bunch of crap stuck on the threads here. And then on all of the clamps themselves, I have them accessible from the bottom, so all of the tightening nuts are going to be tightened from the bottom here. I don't know if that's the best way to do it, it's just easier to get to, so we're going to do that. And kind of much the same on these guys, so they'll all just tip up right there and be good to go. All right, after the muffler and the Y pipe are tightened down, the last piece you got to tighten down is the tail pipes to the Y pipe. Again, they really only go in one area, and really what you're trying to do at the end of the day is try to get this piece of exhaust pipe shooting straight out the back. That way when you do put your tips on there, you have a little bit of adjustment with your tips, but you want to at least get this in the general area. So now that everything's tightened up, I'm going to go ahead and torque everything down nice and tight, and then I'll get the exhaust tips put on, and then we're good to go. The one reminder is make sure that when you are done installing the muffler, you go ahead and reinstall this ground strap. Now it just connects right to the hanger. Put it on the inboard side of that isolator, that way it's closest to the muffler and grounds everything else nicely. So again, it just clips right on there. Before tightening everything down, we went ahead and opted just to throw the tips on there for now, just to give us a ballpark idea of where everything's landing. That way everything could tighten down nicely. A good index is you want this hole inside the tip. So on the factory Rebel tips or factory Chrome tips, there's going to be a hole drilled at the bottom for everything to drain. You want that straight at the bottom. So if you go ahead and clip this into the bracket and then get everything attached to the Kooks system, everything should line up nicely. So once these are loosely on there right now, I'm going to go ahead back up to the front and hand tighten everything, and then come back to the tips here and do final adjustments. It goes nicely tucked in around the bumper. You basically want a finger's distance around there, that way nothing's going to melt. All right, so everything is buttoned up. So like I said before, we tightened up everything for its final location. We installed the exhaust tips. That way it gave us an idea on location, not so much up and down, but more so in and out. So we had to adjust the driver's side one just a little bit, so I had to pull it out of that fitting right there, just so it was a little bit more flush and matched up with the passenger side exhaust tip here. So the last thing we got to do after everything's tightened up and the ground straps on the front is go ahead and reinstall our spare tire, fill up that space, and then fire everything up. But other than that, very straightforward installation. Once you get it's kind of all downhill once you get that exhaust piece out, the OEM exhaust piece. But again, if you undo that sway bar end link and you crank up the truck enough, remove this heat shield as well as the spare tire, it gives you plenty of room with a buddy to get that exhaust system out. So with the spare tire there and that heat shield, we probably wouldn't have been able to get it out because we use all of this room here to get it out. But once you remove it, it opens up a ton of room. So we're going to go ahead and get the spare tire back up in here. Just one last inspection over everything. And then the other thing, one tip with 304 stainless, before you do any sort of driving with it, wipe everything down with Windex. That way it gets all your fingerprints off it and it looks better, I guess, more of a cosmetic thing. That way your fingerprints or any oils from touching it don't get burned into the muffler. So I'm going to go ahead and spray down the muffler and what pipes I can see with some Windex, clean it off. That way everything's nice and clean for the drive. All right, hope you guys picked up some helpful hints in the installation. We're going to get into the exhaust sound clips real quick, but just a couple notes on the system itself. One, the system does take a little bit to break in, so you're not going to get that really heavy, mean growl right off the bat when you start the truck after installing the muffler. It's going to take a little bit, which is why I waited a little while for the muffler to break in before I recorded the after sound clips. The other thing is, once this truck goes into eco mode, so when it goes into that displacement on demand mode, you do get a little bit of drone. It is completely livable though.
It's not terrible. So when it kicks down into V4 mode, you do get a little bit of that humming that goes on. But luckily, since we retained that front resonator in front of the muffler, it could be a lot worse. Other than that, the exhaust sounds awesome. Remember, this is the street kit, so not the race kit. So with this one, once you hammer it, you know, obviously the exhaust comes to life. But after you let off the gas and you get to cruising, you're at 70, you're cruising on the expressway, the exhaust note all but goes away. So you don't get that constant droning on the expressway, which is what I was looking for. I didn't want that crazy loud exhaust, which is why I stayed away from the race kit. So again, this kit's the Kooks Street Kit. This is a little bit more of a tamer exhaust note. But overall, I'm very happy with the note. It sounds awesome. This is the way Hemi should sound. So I got a couple sound clips coming up right after this. But anyway, thank you very much for watching another Waterfowler 41 installation video. Obviously, I hope you guys learned something on it, or hope I pointed out some helpful hints to get your exhaust system installed without cutting it. But other than that, leave any questions, comments you have down below, and hopefully I can keep bringing you a couple more videos here. Appreciate it. Thank you very much for watching, guys.